You're listening to the Superpower Up Podcast with your superpower experts. This is the place where we explore real-life superpowers and give you the tools to unlock your own.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, your superpower expert, and I have such a fun guest with us today. This is anyway, I could just kind of see the sparks and the collision of energy and all of the fun, what's that called? Like the supernova, happening here between us. But we're talking today with Mark Henson, who just happens to be the author of a book called Ordinary Superpowers. Unleash the full potential of your most natural talents. Truly, match made in heaven here, folks. This is going to be a fun dialogue. But he happens to be the Chief Imagination Officer of Spark Space. So you can, you see where we're going with this guy. This is a guy who likes to play in the world. And so he helps people unlock their superpowers, right? I don't know if he uses the same terminology, but essentially very much in alignment with our mission here at Superpower Experts. So I'm really excited about the synergy between us and the fact that he's out doing his work in the world and how complementary it is to ours. And so I trust that this conversation is going to be a lot of fun. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is one of the most exciting shows for me to be on because it just so closely aligns with everything that I do. So I'm super happy to be here.
Very cool. Well, we made the show for you, really. I mean, we've just been waiting for you to find us. And
that's right. The stars aligned and here we are.
So I'm really excited about two things. I'm excited about the topic we're going to talk about today, superhuman powers. And I'm really excited about the topic of your book, Ordinary Superpowers, because I'm sure just like us, you get the question a lot, like, what do you mean superpowers? So, but before we dive into that, I'm just going to tease you all with that little tidbit. We are going to make sure to ask Mark our quintessential question of what are your superpowers?
Well, if I can't answer that, then nobody can, right? I mean,
Perfect.
I better have an answer for that right off the bat. So my superpowers are exploring the new is the way I describe it. So I love to explore new ideas, new physical places. That includes everything from travel to brainstorming to meeting new people. I just love exploring the new. I love to simplify things, so taking complex things and dumbing them down, mostly so that I can understand them. And then I've also found that really helps other people as well. And I have a whole background in writing and copywriting and a lot of things that really played into that superpower. And then the final superpower is communicating through writing and speaking. So the combination of those three things is kind of what led me to write the book, but I find them playing out in my life over and over and over. And then I have a fourth one that actually came up while I was writing this book. As I was exploring deeper and deeper into my own superpowers, I recognized that I had one that I've had my whole life that I never fully recognized, and that was I include the unincluded. I hate for anybody to be outside the circle. And so I will reach out and pull people into a conversation. Or if I'm at a party and I see people that are, on the outside, I try to bring them in because I personally hate that feeling myself. And so I really go out of my way to make sure that nobody else feels that way too. So those are my top four.
Mark, I don't know why we're not just working together. One of our core values is inclusion. And so I love that you brought that up. And again, I think that is, and I don't know that we should even share this secret with the world, but I think that is the true beauty and power behind the dialogue of superpowers. It feels like this great equalizer. I've talked to so many amazing people on this show, and some of them extremely successful in the material world, and others who are just blossoming into that. But when you start asking people, like, what are your superpowers? And they're like, I might have superpowers. It's like we all turn into little kids again going, really? Like, for real? I can say this? Like, is this okay? And, but I think that's really the connecting thread in a lot of this. And of course we have, DC Comics and Marvel to thank for that a little bit. They've marketed for us for the next couple decades.
Exactly.
So there is something magical that occurs in that dialogue. And I don't know, we may be a little bit more woo-woo on our side of the house than you might be, but when you start talking about, exploring the new, do you limit that to what you see here in the physical reality, or do you do more spiritual, metaphysical exploration as well?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it depends on what you define as that spiritual, metaphysical thing, because thought, in one sense, is more of a spiritual activity than a physical activity, right? So when I talk about exploring the new, a lot of that has to do with exploring new thinking, new ways of thinking, new exposing myself to lots of different types of philosophy, as well as worldviews and all kinds of stuff. So do I take it to the sort of supernatural realm? I think I dabble in that. I don't, I wouldn't say I'm kind of in it with both feet, but certainly I try not to shut anything off. As somebody with a pretty hardcore conservative, upbringing, I consider myself very liberal in my thinking and my openness to what's possible and what could be true in the universe.
Mm-hmm. I feel that as well, and it's interesting because most of the people we attract here on this show and the clients that we work with are what I would consider change agents. And I get the sense that the majority of us are also bridges. And so in our own way, we're bridging worlds. And so me coming from like the counter intel world and the military world, like I didn't stumble into the more woo-woo metaphysical spiritual stuff. Like it was kind of kicking and screaming along the way. And so but most of the people we work with have this kind of real rooted aspect of it. So it doesn't surprise me that you give voice to this conservative upbringing, and as you're stretching into this newer space, and I think we all temper our verbiage and our approaches based on the people that we work with and the ones that we help.
Sure.
And so if you tend to help an audience, and I want to take a pause really quickly. This is really important for everyone listening, because I know we attract all these people who've heard the calling. They know they're here to change the world. They're here to have an impact. I think one of the bravest things any of us can do is truly speak to the people we know we can help. And it's challenging, especially in the entrepreneurial sector, because we have this tendency to want to help everybody and not limit our market space. But in limiting it and being completely and utterly true to it, you exponentially increase your ability to contribute, as well as your profitability and everything else. It's quite the opposite of it, or counterintuitive to what we typically believe. And so where you're sitting, I think, is so powerful. The superpower conversation can go in so many directions. And for you to kind of come out and say, like, these are ordinary things, but it's like making the ordinary extraordinary,
Right.
And that's a powerful dialogue.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the underlying basis for the idea here, was that, some of us truly are blessed with what I call supernatural superpowers. Those people that just for whatever reason can sing like an angel. Those people that have the ability to understand math at a level that the rest of us just never will. Those types of abilities truly are supernatural. They're like, the finger of God reached down and touched you on the forehead when you were a baby, kind of thing. And you just came out with abilities that the rest of us don't have. For most people, I found that they don't feel like they have an ability like that. Most people don't feel like they have anything super special about them. And so this idea of ordinary superpowers, to me, is the idea that we all have a unique set of abilities, talents, skills, whatever you want to call them. And especially when used in combination, those top 2 or 3 talents or abilities or skills make you pretty special, even though you might not recognize it. And the reason I call it ordinary superpowers is because these are our most powerful talents, our most powerful natural talents that maybe we've added some development to along the way. But because they're so natural to us and to who we are, we don't see them as special. Everyone around us does, but we don't. And so that's why I call them ordinary superpowers. To us, they just feel ordinary. It's just who we are, how we roll, what we do every day.
Mm-hmm. And we take them for granted.
Exactly.
I agree that here at Superpower Experts, we talk a lot about the difference between predisposed superpowers and unique superpowers. And The predisposed superpowers is, it are some of those traits and abilities. We have a little bit of more of a non-conservative leaning on them, like things like mind reading and psychic ability and empathy and stuff like that. Because I find that a lot of people have those abilities also, and we don't know what to do with them, and we don't recognize them either. And we often run amok, trying to figure out why certain things aren't working real well, because most of the times they present challenges until we identify them and really learn how to work with them. At least the folks that we attract. But I can see the same on the more, if you will, like practical application, like you mentioned, like, being really good at math, or maybe you're just really good at leading people. Well, yeah, that presents its own challenges. Like, where are you leading them, and what are you leading them to, and why you, and all these other things. And so I don't think it matters whether we're talking about some of the more sensational superpowers or the more mundane, if you will, because that's how a lot of people look at them. To me, it's all the same. And this packaging of skill sets and traits that you have make you who you are, and that is special. And how are you going to use those, and what are you going to do with them? I think is a big part of the dialogue right now.
Well, you mentioned earlier about how we're all sort of here to change the world, kind of an idea. And I think sometimes that I know there are a lot of people that would love to make their dent in the universe, to change the world for the better, all of those things. But that's an awful lot of pressure too, to feel like that's what I need to do. That's what I feel like I'm here to do, but I don't know how. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I don't know, I don't even think I have the power to do it. And so I kind of back off from that a little bit. Like, I believe in that, don't get me wrong, but I back it up a little bit to say, look, I don't have to change the world. I just need to change my world. If I use my powers to affect positive change in my family, in my friends, in my company, in my community, the ripple effect of that will go far beyond what I ever even see. And therefore, I've changed the world, and I just didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, we go around and around, and I think it's different for different people. There are folks who, presenting that viewpoint creates this sigh of relief. And there's others who you present that viewpoint and it's like death. It's like you just condemn them to hell, because that's what drives them, And I know, for one, I'm that type of person where it's like, if you had come to me and said that when I was really embarking on this and wondering if I could commit to it, years ago, and there were people who were like, well, you don't have to do that. Like, it's a lot of pressure, that whole dialogue. And it literally made me feel like I was trapped. And, so I think it's important on a lot of levels to say it's all true. Like, that's all fine. There, different people go into paralysis for different reasons at different times. And, but ultimately what you're speaking is pure truth, in the sense that really is the only way to change the world, ironically, but I could not have heard that at that point in time when I was making that decision. I had to believe that it was my mission and my mission alone to go out and change the world, or I don't know that I would have taken a step forward.
What made you feel trapped about that? When you use that word, that sounded like that's a pretty powerful word to use.
Yeah, I think for me, whatever it was that I designed myself with to motivate me into action, it had to feel significant. And I wasn't, at that moment in time, I wasn't significant enough for that. I think over time, I can see how the interlacing happens and recognize exactly what you're speaking of, which is it's a very internal game. And it's only from that internal space that it comes out. But it just wasn't going to be enough to change me. I needed to know that in changing me, it was going to do this, and ultimately lead to that. And I think some of it is the messaging. Like, I've always been in really close communion with God and my higher aspects. And so some of it was just taking up that kind of the torch on that, if you will, and committing to that above all else. So perhaps it just comes down to different journeys for different people, or different messaging at different times. I don't know.
Sure. Well, and I've known people, and you probably have too, that truly, believe, and I believe that they were called to do something significant, and they do it. They step up, they take a swing at it, and they make that dent, that gigantic dent in the universe. But, with 7 billion people on the planet, I don't know if everybody's hearing that kind of loud, clear voice from God saying, go do this thing, right? So when that voice isn't present for you, then what do you do? That's where I always felt trapped, was that feeling of like, well, I haven't heard that voice. Like, so what do I do in the meantime? Do I sit around and wait for it and sit cross-legged and chant until I hear it, or like what do I do?
Well, or is that even the goal? Like, I think that's a valid question too. It's like, it does, if you haven't heard that voice, it doesn't mean somehow you're lacking or you're just not developed enough. I think that we all have the ability to do amazing things, and there is an impact. Perhaps for me, it was a simple matter of ego at first, to be able to say, like, that's what needed to get fed initially to motivate me into action. But regardless, I'm a big fan of questioning anything that we take on as like this kind of carte blanche reality. And I don't find that at all. I've seen too many versions of reality at this point to make that claim. So I think it's worthy just to go, what if I don't want to? Like, what if I just don't? And trust me, I had those moments too. Like, no thanks,
People do that on all kinds of scales too. It's not just, hey, I feel called to go make, to solve world hunger, but also people that like, I feel pulled to, to use some of the talents and abilities that I have. And I don't necessarily want to do that either. And there's much less at stake. There's much less at risk. And I still don't want to do it.
Right.
So, every hero's journey has that sort of call to adventure that's met with resistance by the hero. Like, and that's where every origin story of every superhero comes from, where it's like, where they finally figure out like, holy crap, I have power. Now, like, I didn't ask for it. I didn't, this is not what I wanted. And they have to,
no thanks.
They have to come to that conclusion of like, okay, well, the truth is I have a power, now the choice is, what do I do with it?
Oh, beautiful. As in, with great power comes great responsibility. You and I could probably geek out on all the superpower stuff for quite a while, but we're going to take a quick break. I'm sure that you all are enjoying the conversation. There's lots of yummy goodness to be had here in this dialogue. We're talking with Mark Henson about superhuman powers. When we come back, I really want to get at that differentiator, like the ordinary, the human kind of aspect, and see if we can't pull back the layers on some of this, the questions people have about superpowers. So stick with us and we'll be right back.
Are you here to change the world? Do you talk about things like vibration, frequency, awakening, and consciousness? Are you pretty sure you have superpowers? The Superpower Net is unlike normal coaching programs and conscious communities. We provide training, intuitive guidance, peer-to-peer learning, intensive one-on-one coaching, and a high vibrational network of people just like you. When you join the net, you get 24/7 access to a collaborative group of people who support you as you master your personal power and unlock your superpowers. If you're ready to use your superpowers to change the world, then join the Superpower Net today. Visit superpowerexperts.com/thenet to learn more.
Awesome. Well, we're back with the Superpower Up podcast. We've been talking with Mark Henson about superhuman powers. So, Mark, I'm sure that in your world, you get some of the same questions we do. Like, what do you really mean by superpowers? And I know that we talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the show, and it's purposely vague, right? I mean, it's I've been accused of it's just semantics and all these other things. But I think that there's power in delineating that. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to delineate or clarify what your powers are before you can proactively put them into use on a regular basis and do the most good with them, multiply them and maximize them. So yeah, absolutely. I think you got to dig into that.
Did you just kind of start making it up as you went along?
Making what up?
Like the concept of superpowers and what was a superpower, what wasn't a superpower. Like what was your journey with that?
Well, I got on this kick of, I'll rewind all the way back to, decades now, where I've always been fascinated by superheroes, superhero movies, superpowers, I wanted to have Jedi powers when I was a kid. I was a big Star Wars fan when I was a kid, and I've always loved that idea of supernatural superpowers. And wouldn't it be great to fly? Wouldn't it be great to be invisible? All those kinds of things. And then as I got older and as I became an adult, like realizing that there are those kind of powers out there, not necessarily flying, but there are those sort of beyond explanation kind of powers that people have. And I don't deny those at all. I mean, I don't refute those. I believe in those. I think those are real. I don't feel like I have any myself. I kind of wish I did. But, like we were talking about before the break, where since I don't have some supernatural superpower that gives me something far beyond other humans, so what am I left with? I'm still left with some pretty special stuff. And I just need to define that for myself. Like, what is it that makes me me? What is it that makes me a powerful human being? Because I think everybody's a powerful human being. Even if they don't feel like it, I think everybody has a set of powers that if they can recognize, wake those up, use those, define those, then they can have bigger and better results in their life and the lives of the people around them.
I like that approach to it. And I think that it provides a lot of solace, like you were talking about, because it's a lot of pressure. It's so fascinating to hear you talk, because the people that we attract are kind of the opposite. It's like they have these amazing abilities and they're like, I don't know what to do with them. They know they're supposed to use them or that they want to use them in some capacity to have an impact. And they're really struggling with it. So I think we tend to attract more of the mutants of the world. So I like the delineator. You talk about ordinary superpowers, and what I find is through the podcast, we attract a lot of people who are kind of sitting in the space you're talking about, which is, wow, I really had to think about that question. Whereas we have others who are like, oh my gosh, I channel this and I do this and I float it and I do blah, 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 and I don't know what to do with all of it. Please help me,
Right.
And, and part of my goal with the whole podcast and our goal on a whole with Superpower Experts was that inclusion piece you're talking about. And, we heard the call very clearly to bring everybody into the same dialogue. And so your presence here is so appreciated, and it's a voice that I think people need to hear, because I don't know that we should make the claim that everybody should want to have these supernatural abilities or want to change the world. I just think that is equally toxic as claiming that they don't exist.
Well, and don't you think that like both types that we're talking about, the more metaphysical, supernatural superpowers, or the inherent ordinary superpowers that we're talking about, the reason people don't know what to do with them or don't recognize what they are fully yet is because they haven't figured out a way to fully articulate or define those. And beyond that, they haven't fully given themselves permission to use them.
Mm-hmm. Or like you said, they're afraid of what that means about who they are.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, and they don't want to admit it, or they don't, mm-hmm. They're afraid of what the world's going to think. So I think that there's a huge similarity between both these types of powers that we're talking about, and that we're afraid of what the world is going to think if we were to step fully into that and say, this is who I am and this is what I can do. And not because we're afraid of labels, because if we're truly stepping into our power, we could care less about what label is on it. It's more of, what kind of effect is that going to have on everybody around me? And how are they going to view me? And how are they going to think about me? And are they going to be afraid of me? And if I don't care if you can read minds, or if you just have the ability to make people laugh because you're a funny person, that's your superpower. People are afraid to step fully into their powers because they're afraid they're going to intimidate people. They're afraid that people are going to reject them for whatever reason.
Yeah, I absolutely believe, and I think that there's another layer to it too, and why we're kind of seeing the. I think you and I both picked up on the fact that we could easily polarize this conversation, and it's not necessary. But I think the reason why we could polarize it is because of, there's this whole idea that a lot of people have around, we're in this phase of integration. And so really integrating the practical with the woo-woo, bringing the spiritual into business, bringing love and connection into, more traditional environments, if you will, and crossing all those lines. It's like weaving them all together. And I really do believe in that as a necessary kind of step right now if we want to figure out how to work together, how to solve solutions. I have a huge hope that if we come together and work together and appreciate each other, that we will create really magical and sustainable and creative solutions for some of the bigger issues that we see in the world. And the biggest one being disconnection and separation and pointing fingers and polarization. And
Right.
and so I can feel the pull to be like, well, I'm this and you're this, but I love the fact that we're able to kind of weave that together and go, but we're not. Like, I'm having this image of like a cheesy like 80s movie at the end where it's like everybody in the high school like come together and the cliques all work together. Like, I'm seeing that kind of Breakfast Club kind of concept. But I think it's so important. Like, I don't want to diminish the importance of it. I think that some of us have decided to come together and say, I'm going to serve this population and speak my truth and be this. And I see the concentric circles in what other people are doing, and I appreciate the overlaps.
Yeah. Well, you just hit on a word I think that really kind of helps. It always helps me step more and more into my power is when I try to figure out how best can I serve using this power. Like if I think some of that fear that we have of how people are going to react or how the world is going to see us, some of that can be diminished by just taking a step back and saying, how can I use my power to love other people and serve humanity? Mm-hmm. And that may be my kids or my wife. It might be on a much larger scale. See, I believe that another issue that gets in our way when we're trying to solve these big problems of the world is that the solution seems to be, let's throw more money and warm bodies at it. If we just had enough people involved, just enough warm bodies, we could solve anything. And I think we could solve a lot more things in the world if we put the right bodies, the right talents, the right powers. Then when I speak to nonprofit organizations, I see them cringe when I say, the last thing you need is another room full of warm bodies.
You're questioning their very existence.
Right. I'm like, wouldn't it be better is if everybody in the room had a specific role that they were so totally kick-ass at doing that your problems would get solved like that, instead of we have to now trudge through 50 people that are mediocre at best at helping us do what we need to do, but we've got 50 people to help us out. It's like, just what a waste of time and energy, when if we could line better up with what we're really good at, what we're put here to do, and let's go find opportunities for that. Let's just go. Yeah. When I volunteer, like, I don't volunteer to be a warm body anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't think we need it. Like, but if somebody needs somebody to make announcements on a microphone somewhere, I will do that all day long because I have that talent. Right?
I'm your guy.
Put a microphone in front of me, I'm happy. I will be there all day. But I'm not, me going and holding up a trash can somewhere. Like I've got better talents to put to use. So I will. And the key is to look for those opportunities, right? If I have a power and I'm not actively seeking opportunities to use that power, then I'm missing so many opportunities.
Yeah, you're really speaking my language here. That I wrote an article a while back called "Do You Suffer from Premature Collaboration?" And it came from a lot of what you're talking about. Plus, we have the corporate counterintelligence firm, and through a lot of the due diligence stuff that we systemized over there, what we saw was the biggest risk to most businesses and nonprofits specifically is that desire to rush into collaboration. Like, we think that collaborating is the latest and greatest thing, but when it's good collaboration, and in my opinion, one of the best books on this is Tribal Leadership far like one of the greatest books ever, pointing out some of what you're talking about, which is, where are people playing? Like, how are they choosing to contribute? And when you bring autonomous people into an equation and who are clear on who they are and what they bring into the situation, then the collaboration is really powerful. When people are using the collaboration to define themselves, or using the involvement or membership to a group as a mechanism to define who they are, then the collaboration usually isn't very successful because of that. And I believe it's kind of the next frontier. It's not a, hey, la-di-da-di, kumbaya, we all need to play together. It's a, wait, what are we trying to accomplish here? And how do we go about doing that in the most efficient way possible? And ultimately it comes down to, we need actualized human beings, and, part of our process is we walk people through mastering your personal power, attuning your individual resonance, which is a lot of the energy work stuff that we do. And maybe then you can really start using your superpowers. But people want to have the superpower dialogue without doing the hero's journey, that internal work that you're talking about, to really be able to hone them well, in my opinion. And, obviously that's a soapbox because I just went off on it. But it's to me, there's so much richness in that dialogue. It changes everything. It changes how businesses work. It changes how organizations function. But I think if we're all honest, like, the other way is not working real well.
True. Yeah. I mean, think about it within a business, and I own a business myself, and, there's that tendency to invite everybody to the meeting kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the same kind of issue. It's like, well, what if you only invited people to the meeting that the meeting was relevant to, and vice versa? Or only put people on project teams because they had the ability to contribute something individual and specific that contributed to the whole, instead of just, well, we got a whole bunch of people here, we better just put some of them on a team. It's like, most organizations, my organization, for instance, is about a third of the size of comparably busy retreat spaces. Like, we have 6 people here, and I know of other spaces that don't do any more business than we do, and they do it with 18, 25 people. We have 6 people on our team, and we're really, really good at what we do. Because,
I love it.
Because everybody here knows their role. They're playing to their superpowers. We put people in the right people in the right seats on the right bus kind of thing. And it works. Mm-hmm. And so that's the power of, like, really identifying what your powers are, and then figuring out where to plug in and use those the best, and then kind of trying to erase or get rid of all the other stuff. So much of our lives is cluttered up with things that are non-superpowered talents or abilities or skills or activities, and yet we like to busy ourselves up with that stuff instead of stepping fully into our power and using that as much as possible.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons I'm so drawn to entrepreneurship. I tried academia, corporate, government. I think I've checked all the boxes. And what I love about entrepreneurship is the agility. It's the creativity of it. We operate a few different businesses, and they're all blue ocean, and they're all hybrid business models. So it's like there's so much fun in the creative aspect, and they really can shift and turn on a dime in a way that I haven't seen in the kind of bloated organizations that don't attend to what you're talking about. And I'll be honest, we learned the hard way. One of our another core value in Superpower Experts is synergistic collaboration. And because of course collaboration just wasn't good enough. And so, but we learned exactly like what you're talking about. And in the beginning, it's like, everybody's going to work together. And it's like, okay, that didn't work. And then it was like, okay, what, and we've gone through so many iterations of cracking this code on collaboration. And I think we're finally at this place. But I'll be honest with you, what I didn't want to face, and you mentioned this earlier, I didn't want to come out and make the bold claim that said, hey, you have to master your own personal power first. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, and not that you can't do that in groups, but you at least have to kind of have an idea of where you're sitting. And if you don't really know your superpowers, and you haven't really taken the time to work on that piece, that's work that's going to have to be done one way or the other. And then the second piece that I was much, much more resistant to was that service piece. And I started hearing it for myself, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can kind of play with this, but it took me a while to relax into it. It took me the longest time to say, you know what, I think that, so I can't even say it now, but I'm like, I think that everybody gets to that point. I think that that is actually the secret of superpowers or mastering your own personal powers, that you never actually get to a place of true actualization until you move into being of service. And like you said, maybe it's in your home, maybe it's in your community or your church or your business or something else. But that component, I think it's the missing link, in the sense that we I think we're all waiting for this, like, this aha moment, or the heavens opening up, or the angels singing and saying, you've arrived, now go do your work in the world, now go be of service. But the irony is that I don't know that that happens until you do take the step into being of service.
I am 100% in agreement with you on this.
I am so glad to hear that, because I'm still so scared to say that out loud.
No, and I've been trying to articulate this lately, and I think because it's a radically different idea, because I do think most people are waiting to figure out their purpose and then going and trying to apply their power to it, instead of the other way around. Is no, discover and define and really dig into your power, and then find purpose in your power. Find a place to use your power. And the example I'm thinking of is a hammer, right? Yeah, I mean, you've heard that old line that, like, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, it's like, but a hammer can be used for so many things, right? Not just pounding nails, but it can be used for, construction and destruction. It can be used as a hook. It can be used as a paperweight. It can be used a million different ways. It can have many different purposes, even though maybe the original design was to pound nails into a piece of wood. But if I have a hammer and I really look at the hammer and I say, what can I use this hammer for right now? Maybe I don't have any nails around. Mm-hmm. But maybe I've got another use for a hammer. Maybe I need to take down a wall right now. Well, my hammer has a different purpose now. So I find purpose in the power that's within that hammer, not the other way around. It's not like, oh, there's a wall over there, it needs to come down, and then I start looking around to see if I have anything to take it down with, and maybe I don't, So, but I think you can always find purpose for your power if you know what the power is and you know what it's capable of. And then you can go out and look for ways to use that. To me, that's finding purpose in your power.
Well, and I would say too, I think that a lot of people take that to the extreme, and they're waiting for the big power, like the like what we call unique superpowers, versus some of the predisposed ones. And what I tell people is, like, you already know, like, if we're honest with ourselves, we already know a lot of our predisposed superpowers. So, I'm good at writing, or I'm good at, like you said, put a mic in my hand. I'm good. Well, that's not your purpose here. Your purpose isn't to speak into a microphone. It happens to be something that you're really good at. And so start there. Like, be of service there as you get more and more clear about your unique superpowers. Because I think that a lot of times that mission and purpose, as we're talking about, only really develops in action. And that in action needs to be in alignment for you, not someone else's action. And so sometimes it means working with the traits and the abilities that you are aware of as the other ones unfold, because sometimes the other ones are like those, they are kind of daunting, and like, they're the relationship shaking up kind of powers that you're like, I don't know if I want to come out of the closet with this one just yet. But the easier ones to kind of manage or deal with, start there, because I know that there's a lot of confusion. It's like, okay, wait, so I need to know what my powers are, know how to use them before I take action, but whatever. But I know for a fact that God, the universe, whoever, rewards, not like it's a reward thing, but it's just this natural unfoldment as you step forward more and more fully into contributing to others. Magic really does happen. My husband reminded me of a Zig Ziglar quote earlier today, of the idea of, like, you get what you want when you help people get what they want. Yeah. And what's funny is that when you set off on that trajectory, you may selfishly be doing it because ultimately, that's the way to get what you want. But over time, that goes away altogether. And by the time you get what you want, it's like it's not a big deal. Like, because you're so fulfilled in being somebody who contributes to others.
Yeah, see, that quote I've always had sort of a love-hate relationship with, because I think, like you just mentioned, going into it with that intent of like, my intent to serve other people is so that I can eventually get what I want. Like, I think there's a point where you do have to let go of that kind of intention and say, look, I'm here to serve, and through service, good things will happen. Magic moments will occur. Karma, if you want to call it that, will rebound and come back my way in a very positive way. And I don't know, part of it's just that sort of serving and letting go, letting the universe take care of the rest of it.
I 100% agree with you. And I am not shy about admitting that I will use whatever little trick that I need to help people overcome some of their more pesky, lower frequency pieces. And if that's the piece that gets people motivated into action, I think that we all come around to that. Yeah. But as I was really forthcoming with saying, like, me thinking I was just ordinary was not going to do it. I had to believe something different. I think the same is true when we're learning how to manage some of our more fragmented aspects. And sometimes we have to fool them into thinking, okay, look, like, I get that there's things that we want, like we want to be rich, or we just want to be able to pay our bills. How can I make that happen? Well, okay, the methods I've been trying aren't working. So fine, I'll try this other method. And then along the way, we can kind of relax into I get it. And not everyone needs that. Like, I don't know if we just attract, really difficult people or what it is, but it's like sometimes we got to play those little mind games with ourselves and say, it's okay, and quiet down those pieces. And, I'm okay with that a little bit, but I agree completely with what you're saying, that eventually you just relax into this space of like, wow, this is my existence. Like, I have 100% committed to being of service, and the power that comes through when you do that is nothing that as a single human being could harness on their own, if you will. Like, it has to be in alignment with that greater, I don't know, power or whatever it is, however people want to refer to it. But I appreciate you moving into that dialogue with me today, because it really was challenging for me to step up and say, this is the missing piece, folks. And if you're not willing to accept that at some point you're going to commit to that service piece, then the journey, your journey is going to be really slow and painful.
Yeah. I mean, believe me, this is something that I have been pursuing and struggling with for a long time, because I'm a business owner. I mean, I wrote a book. I'm trying to sell it, right? I'm trying to, I need to make a living. I need to pay back the printing cost, like there's a lot of pressure to get out there and try to, make something happen and try to get something in return. I mean, it's the way the world works, right? It's like, I'm not a missionary. I don't do everything I do for free. And so I've really struggled with that idea of like trying to help people, but also get paid to help people by using my superpowers. And so even just last week, I wrote a blog post about like, you know what? I'm kind of done with that. Like, I realized like that is just like beating my head against the wall. And instead, what I'm going to do is exactly what we're talking about. So it's really interesting that we're having this conversation this week, because this is right exactly where I am in my life right now. I know what my powers are. I know where I serve the world best, and I am tired of trying to sell it. So I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to serve people. And then I'm going to invite them to join me on this journey. And I'm going to invite them to participate in things where maybe they have to pay a little bit of money to participate in that. But I'm no longer going to try to sell or convince anybody of anything. It's this is the journey. Here's where I'm going. You want to go with me? Great. Let's go together. And here's the cost. Hop on the bus. Let's go.
Yeah, it's so interesting. That piece I had down a while ago, it was because of the work that I do with people, and I work with the change agents and the people who, like yourself, who are, this is the space that they're sitting in. It was really laying claim and boldly stating to people, look, you cannot change the world unless you're willing to be of service. Like, end of story. And and some of it was like, okay, well, who am I to make that claim and whatever, but it is mine to make right now. And maybe it's not true for everyone, but I know it's certainly true for the people that we attract. And it just took me a while to really own that and to tell that to people, because it sounded too much like what you're talking about. Like you have to take a vow of poverty. You have to be a missionary, you servitude and service and servants, like those have some interesting connotations to them, or you have to, worship God, or you have to hang your shingle as a coach. Like there was just so much connotation on that. And I finally had to stop and say, whoa, I'm not saying that you have to do any of those things. What I'm suggesting is that you have to figure out how to use them to contribute to others in some form or capacity. And that's truly the only way, in my opinion, to get to that self-actualization piece. It's like everything stops. Like you can climb the mountain all day long, but you will not summit it until you move into that service. And then as soon as you do, you discover along the way that part comes, just like the getting what you want. But by then it's like, that's not why you're doing it anymore.
Right.
But like I said, we do kind of have to fool ourselves sometimes into thinking that. And so that, to me, that's what that Zig Ziglar quote serves is, let's feed everybody whatever it takes to get them over those little humps of fear that their egos or their lower frequency aspects are telling them. Because on the other side of that is the realization that you just recently came to, which is, I get it. I get it. That is the missing component. And I think that we can say that unequivocally at this point.
Well, and there's, the flip side of that too, is that there is value in your power too. So like true monetary value in your power. When you're serving other people, you should get paid for that. You know what I mean? So figuring out what that balance is between service and making a living, and I'm not saying everybody has to charge for their powers. That's not it at all. Like some people are purely can use their powers their entire lives to serve other people, and they're financially taken care of another way. But when your livelihood depends on your powers, like don't ever be afraid to charge for that and charge accordingly. If you have extraordinary power in some sense, it helps people in an extraordinary way, then you probably deserve extraordinary compensation for that. You know what I mean? Because they can't get it anywhere else. And you're serving them so powerfully that the value is just completely there. They don't even think about it. They'll pay you double whatever you're asking because of how you're serving them.
Absolutely.
So a lot of the whole power discussion, whether you're talking about whether you charge for it or not, or whether you're talking about even just stepping into it, is this idea of permission. Have you given yourself permission to really fully accept and move into that?
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's a big conversation for entrepreneurs or anybody that's come out of traditional employment or anything else. And it is a challenge. But trust us, folks, when we talk about it, get to the place where you are contributing to others. And that doesn't mean you're giving away everything for free, but it means that you are willing to touch people's lives in the way that you came here to do, and finding a way to be of contribution, even when it feels like the sales opportunities might not be there. I think that's a powerful dialogue. Mark, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I appreciate you coming on the show and meeting me in the space of that synergy and collaborative spirit. When our worlds are so seemingly similar and also so seemingly different, it's a valuable dialogue. So I appreciate you modeling that with me.
Well, and I appreciate it too. Like this is a very different conversation, and I'll be honest, it's a different conversation than I even expected, and in like the best way possible. Because it's so fun to just explore with somebody, who's like-minded but different.
Perfect.
To me, that's really fun.
Oh, well, good. Well, I'm so glad. Where can people go to find out more about you?
They can go to my website, which is markhenson.me. And if you put a / and then free chapter after that, you'll go to a page where you can download a free chapter of my book, which is it's actually, how a lot of authors say, go get a free chapter of my book, but it's like the intro and it doesn't really tell you anything. I decided to give away chapter 4 of my book, which is the chapter that helps you discover what your ordinary superpowers are.
Look at you being of service.
Yeah, I decided, people might not actually buy the book because they got the meat out of it already, but I figured, let's give you something useful. So you can go there and you can go through the 6 questions that reveal what your superpowers are. And if you're ever struggling with how to figure out, what are that combination of more ordinary superpowers in my life, this is a really nice resource to get you there.
Perfect. And for sure, the people who want what you have can never get enough. So it doesn't matter how much you give away, those opportunities will still be there. So I honor what you're doing in the world, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Awesome. And to all of you out there, I honor you as well. And as always, we appreciate your loyalty. Until next time, go out, uncover your superpowers, and change the world. Take care, everyone.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and discover your superpowers today.